Welcome everybody to the IPRM online clinical meet, which is organized by Department of PMR at Lady Hardinge Medical College. The meet was long overdue actually and was initially planned for April, but due to prevailing conditions and the other issues, we had to postpone it. And I wish to thank Dr. Ritu Muzumdar and Dr. Sonal for initiating, and Dr. Harshanand for making it possible to have us all at this platform. And I welcome you all and hand over the proceedings to Dr. Sonal from Lady Hardinge Medical College for further presentation.
Thank you, ma'am. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are audible.
Respected seniors and my dear friends, I welcome all of you on this online meeting organized by IPRM and Department of PMR, Lady Hardinge Medical College. Now, we have kept the theme of this webinar as pulmonary rehab. We all know that we are passing through a very difficult time with increase in cases of COVID-19 with each passing day. And the evidence has shown that both in acute phase as well as in recovered patients who are left with residual lung problem because of this COVID-19, they have many lung problems left, and the pulmonary rehab is found to be very important. And we know we all round the year we have to tackle this air pollution, and the load of COPD patients, they are also rising. So because of all these things, we have realized that it becomes even more important that we develop a standardized program of pulmonary rehabilitation. In first, we are going to emphasize upon the various components of pulmonary rehabilitation, how to set up a pulmonary rehabilitation clinic in our institution. And second lecture will pertain to pulmonary rehabilitation in COVID-19 patients. Now, I would like to introduce our chairpersons. They need no introduction. They are our stalwarts. Dr. V.K. Gupta, who is consultant and ex-HOD, Department of PMR, Lady Hardinge Medical College, New Delhi. And Dr. Sanjay Wadhwa, sir, who is a professor, Department of PMR, AIIMS, New Delhi, and president, and he's president of IAPMR. I hope their vast experience and vision will enlighten our budding physiatrists. Now I'll hand over to our chairpersons. Since Dr. Gupta, I think he's not connected, Sir Dr. Sanjay Wadhwa, so you can take over the proceeding.
I'm very glad, and I want to express my appreciation to you to make this beginning in the prevailing times. And I also thank Dr. Geeta Handa as Secretary of IPARM to lead this program and keep communicating regularly with us. And I'm thankful to Dr. Harshanand Popalwar and Dr. Harleen. They agreed to be this less time than under ideal circumstances. I'm thankful to my co-chairperson, Dr. Vinod Kumar Gupta sir also. I think without any further conversation, I would like that the program may start, and very soon Dr. Gupta sir will be able to connect and we can carry on. Thank you.
So our first presentation is by Dr. Harshanand Popalwar. Dr. Harshanand, you may take from here.
Thank you, Dr. Sonal. Can you hear my voice?
Yes, it's audible.
Okay, I'm sharing my screen. Am I audible? And can everybody see my screen? Dr. Sonal?
Yes, it's okay.
A very good afternoon to all respected seniors and my colleagues. First of all, I would like to thank organizers for giving me this opportunity to present this topic, overview of pulmonary rehab program and setting up of pulmonary rehab clinic. So I shall start my presentation. I shall be covering the brief history of pulmonary rehab, prevalence and types of pulmonary diseases, a definition of pulmonary rehab, assessment, execution, and setting up of pulmonary rehab clinic. So as all of you can see these two images, one is mountain and another is a person who's taking rest at the sofa. So why there is a difference of lung capacities of these two different individuals? So the answer would be the capability of high work performance can be attained by proper conditioning of body by regular exercises. So the question is, can we utilize the performance improvement skills in patients with respiratory diseases such as COPD? And answer is yes. The pulmonary rehabilitation exactly deals with this aspect. So start with first brief history of pulmonary rehabilitation. way back in 1952, Dr. Alvan L. Barach, he suggested that chronic respiratory patients, the progressive improvement in ability to walk without dyspnea might be a physiological response similar to a training program, just like in athletes. The famous pulmonologist Dr. Thomas L. Petty, who has done tremendous work in pulmonary rehab, in 1960s he first established a standardized outpatient program of pulmonary rehabilitation. In 1974, American College of Chest Physicians formulated a definition of pulmonary rehabilitation, and in 1980, the American Thoracic Society issued an official statement in which pulmonary rehabilitation components were described and benefits specified. In 1999, a group of experts under the auspices of American Thoracic Society, they first produced a 40-page document that reviewed the state of the art of management of pulmonary rehabilitation, especially in COPD. In 2001, a global initiative of obstructive lung disease listed pulmonary rehabilitation as standard and established treatment of COPD. In 2003, pulmonary rehabilitation was included in the algorithm for the management of stable COPD. This was the biggest milestone in the pulmonary rehabilitation history. Then eventually, other chronic respiratory diseases were also considered for pulmonary rehabilitation. American Thoracic Society in 2013, they revised the guidelines for the pulmonary rehabilitation, and which is currently being followed throughout the world. So, pulmonary disease, the prevalence, the global prevalence of COPD in adult of more than 40 years is 9 to 10%. The one study published in Lancet in 2018, they say that the number of cases of COPD increased from 28.1 million in way back in 1990 to 53.3 million in 2016. That means an increase of prevalence of from 3.3 to 4.2%. So India contributes very significantly to the mortality from COPD, significantly affecting health-related quality of life in the country. COPD is surpassing malaria, TB even today, and the gap would get wider with the time in near future. So obstructive pulmonary diseases. The pulmonary diseases are basically of two types: obstructive pulmonary diseases and restrictive pulmonary diseases. In obstructive pulmonary diseases, they are basically broadly divided into emphysema and chronic bronchitis, asthma, bronchiectasis, and cystic fibrosis. Restrictive pulmonary diseases are interstitial lung diseases such as idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, sarcoidosis, scoliosis, other neuromuscular disorders such as muscular dystrophy and ALS. So, what are the common diseases which require pulmonary rehab? COPD, we can list as asthma, lung resection surgeries, cystic fibrosis, pre-op and post-op lung volume reduction surgeries or lung transplantation surgeries, etc. etc. So, what is pulmonary rehabilitation? The National Institute for Health and Clinical Excellence in COPD Guidelines 2010, they mentioned that the pulmonary rehabilitation is a multidisciplinary program of care for patients with chronic respiratory impairments that is individually tailored and designed to optimize each patient's physical and social performance and autonomy. So, you see the scientific evidence of the pulmonary rehab program. They say that pulmonary rehabilitation improves dyspnea in patients with COPD, level 1A recommendation. It improves health-related quality of life, again 1A recommendation. Pulmonary rehabilitation is beneficial for some patients with chronic respiratory diseases other than COPD, that is 1B recommendation. Then pulmonary rehabilitation, it reduces the number of days spent in the hospital, 2B recommendation, and it provides the psychosocial benefits in COPD, again 2B recommendation. Pulmonary rehabilitation is a cost-effective in patients with COPD, 2C recommendation, and there is insufficient evidence to determine whether pulmonary rehabilitation improves survival in patients of COPD. So, to summarize grossly, the benefits of pulmonary rehabilitation: it improves exercise capacity, it reduces perceived intensity of dyspnea, improved health-related quality of life, reduce hospitalization, reduce anxiety and depression from COPD. Grossly, the pulmonary rehabilitation team, with having a patient-centered approach, the team members are pulmonary medicine specialists, and PMR specialists, physical therapist, dietitian, psychiatrist, or psychologist. So let us understand more about the outline of pulmonary rehabilitation program. So the gross outline is patient assessment, patient education and motivation, patient exercise training, program evaluation and maintenance. So the assessment before beginning of the pulmonary rehab, this concludes medical history. This includes chief complaint, duration of illness, total episodes of dyspnea, cough with or without expectation. Then assess the smoking and nutritional status in the form of BMI. Then perform spirometry or pulmonary function test before and after pulmonary rehab program. Documentation of medication started by pulmonary medicine specialist. Then assessment of exercise capacity. This includes 6-minute walk test. Then assess quality of life through chronic respiratory disease questionnaire or St. George respiratory questionnaire. Then breathlessness by modified MMRC dyspnea scale or modified Bose dyspnea scale during exercise assessment. After assessment, calculation of maximum heart rate, targeted heart rate, and we are supposed to set the level of rate of perceived exertion. Other crucial important component is assess the patient's goal. Helping patients to identify their most salient problems can help patients to establish achievable and motivating goals. Patient should be evaluated for contraindications and precautions to exercises while implementing exercise program. At the same time, supervisory staff should be aware of the criteria for termination of test or exercise program and the other important safety issues. So now, execution of pulmonary rehab program. I have divided into the basically 8 components. First component start with patient education, optimization of medical management, proper nutritional advice, then physical reconditioning exercises, controlled breathing techniques, secretion management, use of oxygen, and assessment outcomes. So patient education. Through education, patient can become more skilled at collaborative self-management and they are more adherent to their treatment plan. Education can be given in groups, individually, or in the form of handouts. Other educational topics may include sputum clearance, energy conservation techniques, swallowing, home oxygen, and sexuality issues. Second crucial important point is optimization of medical management. In charge of pulmonary rehab clinic, he should be aware about the medications prescribed by primary treating physician or pulmonary medicine specialist. This is important because the correct use of medication and method of administration can be taught through the pulmonary rehab clinic so that optimized maximum efficacy of the medicine can be achieved. This global initiative for chronic obstructive lung disease, this is called GOLD. They have formulated the strategy of management. They have divided the COPD in different categories like mild, moderate, severe, and severe, and very severe. And they have, according to the FEV1 percentage prediction, they have calculated these gradings. So they have said that the pulmonary rehabilitation should be started in the standard line of management from this moderate category onwards. So, as a PMR specialist or in charge of pulmonary rehabilitation clinic, we should be familiar about the medicines which is most commonly being prescribed for the COPD. This includes the bronchodilators and anti-inflammatory. Bronchodilators are categorized into the beta agonists. They are again short-acting and long-acting. Short-acting could be salbutamol, most commonly used. Long-acting could be formoterol and salmeterol. Anticholinergic, short-acting, most commonly used are ipratropium bromide, and long-acting will be tiotropium. There could be a combination of both short-acting beta agonist as well as anticholinergic. Then methylxanthine is another group. Then inhaled glucocorticosteroids, they act as an anti-inflammatory. So most commonly used are beclomethasone, then budesonide. Then combination of long-acting B2 agonist as well as glucocorticosteroids are also can be used. Along with that, patients get generally systemic glucocorticosteroids like prednisolone or methylprednisolone. Then third component is nutritional advice. Maintaining good state of nutrition is a fundamental in the rehabilitation of patients with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease or respiratory diseases. So the pathogenesis is why patients need good nutritional advice. The reason is, scientific reason is, because of chronic COPD, there is increased work of breathing. Because of that, there is increased energy expenditure in the very much act of breathing. So patients' resting energy expenditure is elevated instead of increased work of breathing. Thus, in order to cope up with the disease, one must have available calories to meet the challenging demand. They say that then extra 450 to 700 calories other than normal requirement is advised for the patients of COPD. Then high protein, high carbohydrate diet is advised to fulfill the extra calorie demand. Fourth important component is physical reconditioning exercises. The process of deconditioning associated with inactivity, it initiates a vicious cycle. This vicious cycle increases the dyspnea even at lower physical demand. So the exact pathogenesis is chronic respiratory disease. It leads to dyspnea. Dyspnea leads to inactivity. Inactivity leads to deconditioning. Deconditioning aggravates worsening of dyspnea and ultimately disability and death. So physical reconditioning exercises. Exercise conditioning is the most important factor in the rehabilitation of patients with symptomatic respiratory diseases. So what exactly happens with the proper well-defined exercise program? This well-defined exercise program causes increased maximal oxygen uptake, increase in blood volume, increase in hemoglobin level and stroke volume. This leads to improvement in the peripheral use of oxygen. This leads to increased muscular strength and improved blood and energy supply. Then improved muscle coordination, changes in body composition with increased muscle mass and loss of adipose tissue. Then improved sensation of well-being, and ultimately the possibility of increased chances of survival. I would say this is the most crucial important part of the pulmonary rehabilitation program. So this same effect of physical reconditioning is beneficial for chronic obstructive pulmonary diseases as well as some other respiratory diseases. So what exactly training which we are supposed to implement? So broadly divided into strength training and endurance training. Strength training achieved by increasing myofibrils in certain muscle fiber, and endurance training increases the number of capillaries and enzymatic mitochondrial content into the trained muscle. So American College of Sports Medicine guidelines, they have prescribed some basic components. They include cardiorespiratory endurance, strength and muscle endurance, and flexibility. Cardiorespiratory endurance includes dynamic exercises of large muscle group. This includes overground and or treadmill walking or stationary like cycling or outdoor bicycling or stair climbing. Frequency would be 3 to 5 days per week or at least 3 times in a week. Duration, it varies depending upon the patient's condition. It is 20 to 60 minutes per session with the intensity of 50 to 55% of heart rate reserve or 60 to 90% of maximum heart rate. And rate of perceived exertion should be in the category of 12 to 16. Then strength and muscle endurance training. This includes the resistance training, low resistance, high repetition. This is a key. In the mode of variable resistance or hydraulic weight machines or isotonic weight machines like dumbbells or free weights, etc. Again, frequency will be 2 to 3 days per week with the one set of 3 to 20 repetitions on 8 to 10 exercises that includes all major muscle groups. Intensity would be volitional exhaustion on each set or stop 2 to 3 repetitions before volitional exhaustion. Flexibility, stretching of all major group of muscles, minimum 2 to 3 days per week or ideally 5 to 7 days per week with the 15 to 30 set of exercises, 2 to 4 stretching exercises set. Intensity would be stretch to the tightness at the end of the range of the motion, but it should not create any pain. Other crucial important part is controlled breathing technique. The patients of patients of COPD, they generally exhibit a very altered or a different pattern of respiratory muscle use. The ribcage inspiratory muscles generate more pressure than diaphragm as diaphragm gets flattened. Because of flattened diaphragm, as diaphragm is not working properly, so work of breathing is mostly on the intercostal muscles. So the controlled breathing techniques, what they do, they help to work the diaphragm more efficiently. They try to get the proper normal physiological dome shape of diaphragm. So there are different breathing techniques. So first, we start with diaphragmatic breathing. As you can see in this image, the patient should lie in the supine with the pillow at the knee and hip. Then one hand should be placed on the thorax and one hand should be kept on the abdomen. The patient inspires by using the abdominal muscles and the hand gives the proper biofeedback whether the patient is breathing through the diaphragm or not. So the benefits is they increases tidal volume, decreases functional residual capacity, and increase in maximum oxygen uptake. The other important is segmental breathing. Segmental breathing generally advised in case of interstitial lung diseases. In this, the patient sits or stand, and clinicians put the hand particularly on the segment, and it applies pressure to the thoracic cage to resist respiratory excursion in a segment of lung. As the clinician feels local expansion, the hand resistance is decreased to allow inhalation. This causes this facilitates the expansion of adjacent regions of the thoracic cavity. Then pursed lip breathing. In this case, as you can see in the image, the person inhales through the nose and exhales through the pursed lip by forming a wide, thin slit with the lips. The patient creates an obstruction to exhalation, slowing the velocity of the exhalation and increasing mouth pressure. Expiration lasts 2 to 3 times as long as inspiration, just like what we do in yoga or when we pronounce the Om chant. What is exact benefit? It prevents air trapping due to small airway collapse during exhalation and promotes greater gas exchange. It can be advised 50 to 30 repetitions daily at 4 hours of interval for 5 days a week. They are very much beneficial in case of emphysema and other air trapping diseases. Then secretion management. This is crucial, another important. So in secretion management, airway clearance techniques are essential. The first is controlled cough. In this patient generally lean forwards and with a closed glottis, they creates extra exaggerated or more pressure from the chest and abdomen and try to remove the cough by coughing or by opening the glottis. The only disadvantage of the controlled cough technique is that there may be a chance of injury to the tracheobronchial tree. Then another component is huffing. In huffing, it is followed by deep inhalation and patient attempts short and frequent exhalation by contracting abdominal muscles and saying ha ha ha. In this, the glottis is remained open throughout the coughing, so it is easy to remove the cough and there are less chances of injury to the tracheobronchial tree. It is a more efficient means of secretion removal. Then postural drainage, as most of us are aware about that, it is a gravity assisted positioning to improve the flow of mucus secretions out of the airway. The affected lung segment is placed uppermost to increase oxygenation and drainage. It is generally best done to be after awakening in the morning and to be avoided after food. So there are different positions of postural drainage depending upon which lobe we are supposed to drain accordingly. So before this, the percussion is crucially important while giving postural drainage or chest physiotherapy. It can be both by hand or by mechanical percussor. They generally helps to loosen the mucus within the lungs. So vibration, rapid shake back and forth on the thorax over a segment of the lung, causing mucus to move towards the trachea. This can be done by hand also, and this can be done by mechanical vibrator. The hand vibration, the frequency shall be around 5 hertz, and mechanical vibrators, the frequency ranges from 5 hertz to 50 hertz. We can set accordingly depending upon the patient's condition. In secretion management, another important device is a cappella device. It is basic. The principle of a cappella device is it is a positive expiratory pressure along with vibration. So a cappella combines both the positive expiratory pressure therapy and airway vibrations to mobilize secretions and can be used in virtually any position, allowing patient to move freely, sit and stand or recline. As you can see into the image, this a cappella mouthpiece is to be kept onto the mouth, and at the same time patient is advised to expire through this device. At the same time, while expiration, this a cappella device produces some vibrations. This vibrations transmits from the mouth to trachea to the all tracheobronchial tree, and all the secretions and mucus dislodges, and it is very easy to remove the secretions. Vibratory positive expiratory therapy system improves clearance of secretions. It is easier to tolerate than chest physical therapy, takes less than half the time of conventional chest physiotherapy sessions, and facilitate opening of airway in patients with lung diseases with secretory problems such as COPD or cystic fibrosis. Then inspiratory muscle training. In this, incentive spirometer can be used. Nowadays, a mechanical chest respirator can be used for the strengthening of respiratory muscles. Then use of oxygen. Oxygen is recommended for patients who desaturate during exercises. When SpO2 falls below less than 90%, we advise use of oxygen. Generally, pressure should be 2 to 4 liters per minute via face mask or nasal cannula. Generally, nasal cannula is to be preferred. Then total duration of pulmonary rehab program, that is outpatient rehab program, should be 5 days a week or a minimum 3 days a week for 8 to 12 weeks. Then assessment outcomes. Outcomes should be measured in terms of change in sputum production, change in breath sounds of lung fields being drained, changes in vital signs, changes in arterial blood gas analysis, improvement in maximal and submaximal exercise capacity, dyspnea, fatigue, health-related quality of life, and psychological symptoms. These are assessment pro forma which we generally practice at Sutherland Hospital Pulmonary Rehabilitation Clinic, where we do the initial patient assessment. In this, we record the relevant history, smoking history, then PFT results, then assessment of exercise capacity in the form of 6-minute walk test, then quality of life in the form of St. George Respiratory Disease Questionnaire, then MMRC's dyspnea scale, then assessment of psychiatric comorbidities if any there. Then we do the clinical examination, recording of vital signs, then height, weight, and BMI, respiratory system examination, EPG analysis, RBS, ECG to rule out ECG to rule out any cardiac condition, SpO2 recording, and skin fold thickness to record the loss of muscle mass. This is the pro forma which we follow. This is 6-minute walk test, and this is MMRC scale for dyspnea, and this is St. George's questionnaire. Then this is a rehab protocol where what exactly we do. We start with the patient education and counseling. This includes information about the disease and prognosis, then correct use of medication, then nutritional advice, then counseling in case of anxiety and depression, then importance of physical activity, and information of energy conservation techniques. Special instructions we generally give pursed-lip breathing technique exercises or diaphragmatic breathing exercises, or huffing techniques, and incentive spirometry. High tension oxygen therapy is to be advised depending upon the patient's SpO2 saturation. Then postural drainage therapy prescription. Then actual exercise program. This we start with the stretching exercises for 5 to 10 minutes, then followed by aerobic conditioning exercises. This includes warm up for 5 minutes, then exercise session or rehab session, which includes treadmill walking, stationary cycle upper or lower extremity, and then climbing up and down, then cool down phase for 5 minutes. Then strength training exercises. This includes weight curve or dumbbells or exercises bands of both upper and lower extremity. Then this is rehab attendance sheet. Then this is anxiety depression assessment, and this is follow-up assessment of outcome measures. So let's see about this setting up of pulmonary rehab clinic. So what are the requirements of pulmonary rehab clinic? So basically 4 things are essential. First is infrastructure, manpower, equipments, and standard operating procedures. There is no access standard guidelines for setting up of pulmonary rehab clinic. Infrastructure wise, hall of 400 square feet with air conditioning is sufficient for simultaneous session of 4 to 6 patients. Then manpower, which includes PMR specialist, staff nurse, nursing attendant, physical therapist, and housekeeping worker. Equipment, it can be divided into 3 parts: equipment or tools for assessment, equipments for therapy sessions, and equipments for medical emergency. So equipments or tools of assessment includes walkway of 6-minute walk test, then BP apparatus, then weighing machines, height measurement and pulse oximetry, then skill fold thickness caliper, and patient education handouts. Then equipments for therapy session includes automatic treadmill, recumbent cycle, upper and lower extremity exerciser, then elliptical trainer, dumbbell set, exercise band set or gym ball set, oxygen cylinder set, parallel bar or staircase trainer, postural drainage treatment table, etc. Then equipments for medical emergency. This includes laryngoscope, endotracheal tube of various sizes, bamboo bag, disposable gloves, face masks, etc. And along with inclusion of essential life-saving drugs. So the total cost of setting up a pulmonary rehab clinic cost around 6.6 lakh. So it's a SOP, standard operating procedure. Here in our setup, we follow the identification of symptomatic chronic lung disease patients, and we optimize the maximum medical therapy, then rule out any medical, psychological, or musculoskeletal instabilities, and start with patient education and counseling about pulmonary rehab program, assess acceptability, feasibility, and affordability, then pre-program assessment, initiation of pulmonary rehab patient program, motivation of patients to achieve pulmonary rehab goals. Our data, we started the total number of patients we have seen for last 1 year was 54. The pulmonary rehab clinic has been stopped since 4 months due to COVID-19 pandemic. So out of 54, the 37% has complete 12-week rehab program. 35% had advised home-based rehabilitation program because of other circumstances, and 28% discontinued pulmonary rehabilitation program. Those who have completed 12-week rehab program were 20 patients. Out of them, 45% were of COPD, 45% were of interstitial lung disease patients, and 10% were others. This is inauguration of pulmonary rehabilitation program in September 2018. This is our setup of pulmonary rehabilitation program at VMMC and Safdarjung Hospital, New Delhi. So the question is, a low-cost pulmonary rehabilitation program for COPD patient, is it any of good value? The same paper was published in IJPMR in 2006. So the conclusion of the same paper is, even a low-cost outpatient and home-based comprehensive rehabilitation program showed substantial benefit in objective measures of dyspnea and exercise tolerance. It should be considered as a mandatory component of COPD management, and future research should be targeted on the effects of most streamlined low-cost program on various parameters and concerns of patients with COPD. COVID-19 and pulmonary rehabilitation, I feel that this is a new window of opportunity for PMR specialists. Dr. Harleen, our next speaker, is going to talk on this topic. So, take home message. I would say just take message because everybody is at home. So, pulmonary rehabilitation is an integral and essential part of management of COPD. It is highly effective and beneficial to patients of COPD and other respiratory diseases. Our country needs more pulmonary rehabilitation centers, especially in this COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you for your patience. Thank you.
Uh, uh, that was very informative, Dr. Harshanand. Now, second lecture is by Dr. Harleen Uppal, and she's going to speak about pulmonary rehabilitation in COVID-19 patients. Over to you, Dr. Harleen.
A very good afternoon to my respected chairpersons, respected seniors, and my dear colleagues. The topic for today's talk is Importance of Pulmonary Rehabilitation Program in COVID-19 Patients. So, as we all know, that COVID-19 is a highly infectious respiratory disease. It can lead to various degrees of respiratory, physical, as well as psychological dysfunctions. Since we, PMNR physicians, deal with all these three and have solutions for all these three, the role of PMNR physicians is indispensable in the rehabilitation of COVID-19. However, as the scope of this lecture is limited to pulmonary rehabilitation, I will mainly focus on pulmonary rehab. To begin with, let's see the pathological findings which have been documented in COVID-19. So, patients have been documented with pneumonia characterized by bilateral interstitial infiltrates. Pulmonary parenchyma has presented with focal hemorrhages as well as necrosis. There has been diffuse lung injuries, and in some cases, intraalveolar fibrinous exudates have also been found. As compared to the SARS, which was prevalent during 2002 and 2004, the pathological changes such as pulmonary fibrosis have not been a dominant feature in COVID-19. Multiple organs have been affected in COVID-19, like the kidney, spleen, liver, and viral myocarditis cannot be ruled out. So there have been incidents of CNS involvement as well, showing critical illness myopathy and neuropathy, as well as post-infectious neurological syndromes like Guillain-Barré syndrome. The pathophysiology of COVID-19 is very important to understand, as then only we can plan the best pulmonary rehab program for our patients. So, the COVID-19 leads to serious alterations of the ventilation perfusion ratio. The distribution of the disease is mainly basilar, posterior, and peripheral. So, this distribution magnifies the hypoxemia caused. This leads to hypoxic respiratory insufficiency or hypoxic respiratory failures. The clinical features in COVID-19 are no different from any other chronic pulmonary disease, and these need to be dealt with while pulmonary rehabilitation program is going on. So what are they? Breathlessness, fatigue, weight loss, change in affect leading to anxiety, depression, muscular weakness, and necessity to recruit accessory muscles for ambulation and activities of daily living. SARS-CoV-2 syndrome, as COVID-19 is also known as, can present as follows. So, In 80% of the cases, it has been noted that the patients present as asymptomatic cases or having very mild respiratory diseases. In 15% of the cases where patients might be hospitalized and they lead to moderate to severe pneumonia, whereas only 5% of the cases have needed ICU admissions and mechanical ventilation due to the occurrence of acute respiratory distress syndrome and multiple organ failures. Now, what is pulmonary rehabilitation has been very elaborately discussed by Dr. Harshanand. So, I will not be going into details of the definition as well as the benefits of pulmonary rehabilitation. Let's come to the goals of pulmonary rehabilitation in COVID-19. So, the short-term goals are to alleviate dyspnea and relieve anxiety and depression. Long-term goals are to preserve the patient's function to the maximum extent, to improve his or her quality of life, and to facilitate his or her return to society. This is a very good paper which has been published in a PubMed journal, that is a Chinese medical journal, and this has been published by the Chinese Association of Rehabilitation Medicine, as well as Chinese Association of PMNR. And the authors have been experts from epidemic control, experts from PMNR, experts from critical care, as well as evidence-based medicine experts. And let's see what recommendations they are giving for pulmonary rehab. So they say that in COVID-19 inpatients, pulmonary rehab can cause symptoms of dyspnea. Pulmonary rehab can treat the symptoms of dyspnea, anxiety, and depression, and in turn solve the problems of physical functions and quality of life. It can improve physical functions and quality of life. In severe and critical inpatients, early pulmonary rehabilitation is not at all suggested. In patients who are in isolation, pulmonary rehabilitation guidance should be given through educational videos, instruction manuals, or remote consultations. The assessment and monitoring of pulmonary rehabilitation should go throughout the pulmonary rehab process. There should be a proper grade protection which should be offered. What are the protection categories for pulmonary rehabilitation in COVID-19? So, this is again recommendations from the same paper from China, and we are yet to have such recommendations for pulmonary rehabilitation by the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. But till the time we can go through these and we can use them. So, if the patients are continuously being tested negative, the healthcare workers would need N95 mask, they would need gloves, disposable cap, working gown, and of course hand sanitizer. So, but if the cases are confirmed, but there is no aerosol generation procedures involved in pulmonary rehab, then we need N95 mask, gloves, face shield, disposable cap, disposable protective gown, shoe cover, as well as hand sanitizer. Whereas if the patients are confirmed COVID positive and we have some aerosol generation procedures being involved, healthcare workers would need N95 mask, 2 pair of gloves, face shield, disposable cap, anti-penetration isolation gown, shoe cover, as well as hand sanitizer. What are the recommendations by the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare? They say that if we are dealing with COVID positive aerosol generating procedures, we need the full personal protective equipment. Whereas if we are dealing with COVID positive non-aerosol generating procedures, we need N95 mask and gloves only. While dealing with COVID negative patients as well, N95 mask and gloves are recommended. Contamination of hospital staff is monitored through mandatory body temperature measurements at hospital entry and exit. And these are being followed in our various government hospitals very nicely. So they also recommend that mild and moderate cases, the rehabilitation intervention should be introduced as early as possible, whereas in severe and critical cases, life-saving measures should be prioritized, and only pulmonary rehabilitation interventions should be started when the patients are stable. So, what are the recommendations for pulmonary rehab? I have divided them into these three categories. That is, mildly symptomatic patients, they would obviously be COVID positive. Severe and critically ill patients, again, COVID positive. And the most important part which we have to focus is management after discharge of mostly of severe and critical ill patients, as they would need major rehabilitation interventions. These would be COVID negative because they are after discharge. So let's begin with the mildly symptomatic patients. These mildly symptomatic patients in India are mostly being managed at home because they are very mildly symptomatic. So, what are the exclusions for these patients, and when they should not be offered pulmonary rehab? That is, temperature more than 100.4 degree Fahrenheit with an initial consultation time of less than 7 days. Now, this is because majority of the cases after about 7 days, they might become critical or severe. Many of them have been shown to become critical. So we should not intervene in less than 7 days period, as we don't know how severe that patient is going to end up with. So and also in whom the duration from disease onset to dyspnea is less than equal to 3 days. Then whose chest x-ray shows more than 50% progression within 24 to 48 hours, with a blood oxygen saturation level of less than 95%, and with a resting BP of less than 90/60 or more than 140/90. When should we terminate the pulmonary rehabilitation program? Whenever the Borg dyspnea score is more than 3, or the patient has any of the following symptoms, that is, chest tightness, shortness of breath, dizziness, headache, blurred vision, heart palpitations, profuse sweating, and balance disorder, as well as any other condition which the clinician determines to be unsuitable. What are the exercise recommendations? So, the intensity of exercise which has been recommended is between rest and light exercise. So, that is between 1 metabolic equivalent to less than 3 metabolic equivalents. The frequency should be around twice a day, 1 hour after meal, and based on the patient's physical status, each session can last from 15 to 45 minutes. Patients who are prone to fatigue or are physically weak should undergo intermittent exercises. And what are the type of exercises? That is, breathing exercises, yoga, exercises that are recommended to prevent thrombosis, etc. Now, coming to the severe and critically ill patients. So, these would mostly be admitted in the ICUs or they would be in the hospital definitely. So, what are the pulmonary rehab recommendations? Most important in such patients is positioning management. And as we all know that there have been many papers regarding the benefit which has been seen in prone positioning. And even for more than 12 hours a day, they have seen that there has been great benefits from prone positioning. So, why is this so? Because this position improves the ventilation and perfusion ratio. However, if the patient on prone positioning has been documented to be seeing decrease in oxygenation, then immediately the position should be changed. And another position which is recommended is raising the head end of the bed by about 60 degrees. That should be a gradual increase. Positioning management is carried out in 30-minute sessions, and 3 sessions are conducted each day. Now, early mobilization cannot be ruled out, and it cannot be more emphasized. So, firstly, we begin with periodic flipping and activities on the bed, such and followed by sitting on the bed, moving out of the bed to chair, sitting on the chair, standing up, and stepping. And the sequence is gradually advanced. Only the secondly, active and passive exercise training is performed within the full range of motion. The duration should not exceed 30 minutes, nor it should exacerbate fatigue. Rehabilitation of COVID-19 in such patients can be outlined as we can see in the table below. So, most important points in such critically ill patients are mobilization, frequent posture changes, therapeutic postures, active limb exercises, strengthening of peripheral muscles, neuromuscular electrical stimulation, respiratory muscle training in case of inspiratory muscle weakness, and non-productive. While here we can see that it only has bronchial clearance techniques mainly, only in hypersecretive patients with chronic respiratory diseases. Okay, and this is also only preferably using disposable devices with self-management. So like closed plastic bags should be given to the patients. Nothing more than this is there, because everything else will be aerosol generating and should be avoided. When do we terminate? Again, it is quite similar to the last scenario. So whenever the patient has high fever, worsening dyspnea, pulse oximetry is less than 93%, or at least 4-point drop during exercise, or any of the symptoms which I already discussed, or there is evidence of X-ray progression of more than 50% within the 24 to 48-hour period. What are the salient features of COVID-19 pulmonary rehab? So the most distinctive characteristic of rehab for patients with COVID-19 is the infectivity of the disease. So operations that can increase the risk of infection, that is aerosol generating procedures, is a complete no. So instructed cough, expiration training should never be done. Tracheal compression should be minimized as much as possible. Nebulization is a no. Incentive spirometry is absolutely no. CPAP and BiPAP as well are not recommended. A sealed plastic bag should be used to cover the mouth during expectoration to prevent infection. And majority of the pulmonary rehab of COVID-19 patients who are severely critically ill should be mainly through educational videos, brochures, remote consultations, or online teaching, so as to save protective equipment and avoid cross-infection. Management after discharge. Now, these are the patients who have tested negative and who have been discharged. And for this, this is a very good review article which has been published in Chronic Diseases and Translation Medicine Journal. And if anybody interested can go through it. So, what are the recommendations from this paper? Before we commence the program, we have to do a clinical and exercise risk assessment. Now, this has already been discussed by Dr. Harshanand, so I won't go much into detail, but still you can have a look that patients' clinical symptoms, vital signs, auxiliary examinations, imaging, comorbidities, contraindications are to be noted. Questionnaires about quality of life, daily activity endurance, psychological and nutritional assessment should be undertaken. Results should be combined with patients' aerobic endurance, muscle strength, balance, and flexibility, and an individualized rehabilitation prescription should be formulated. The prescription contents should include aerobic exercises like walking, fast walking, jogging, swimming, and yoga is another form of a very good aerobic exercise. These should be started from low intensity and gradually improved to further ahead, and the duration should be 3 to 5 times a week, and it can be 20 to 30 minutes each time. Strength training, progressive resistance training is recommended. The training load of each target muscle group is 8 to 12 rotations per minute, and 1 to 3 groups should be targeted at a time. The training interval of each group is 2 minutes, 2 to 3 times a week. The training load is increased by 5 to 10% every week. Balance training is again, which should a very important aspect, including unarmed balance training and balance training instruments. Respiratory training this is the most important part. So, breathing exercises involving posture management, adjustment of breathing rhythm, and breathing retraining, that is diaphragmatic and pursed lip breathing. Respiratory muscle training using a respiratory muscle trainer. Thoracic expansion training, mobilization of respiratory muscle groups. Airway clearance techniques, including forced expiratory techniques and positive expiratory pressure or oscillatory positive expiratory pressure, can also be used as aids in such patients. Activity of daily living guidance cannot be overlooked, and these should also be included in the rehabilitation program. When do we terminate the program? When the peripheral capillary oxygen sat is less than 88%, or the patient develops symptoms such as the same symptoms which have already been discussed. And so here we can see that we go further below the PO2. If it is less than 88%, now the SPO2 of less than 88%, then we have to terminate. Here I'm giving an example of a very good randomized control study which has been done. Now it involved 72 participants with 36 patients in each group, and the interventions which were done were respiratory muscle training, cough exercise, diaphragmatic training, stretching exercise, and home exercise. It was a 6 weeks respiratory rehabilitation program, and so 36 patients were in the intervention group and 36 in the control group. And what they saw was that it did improve the respiratory function, quality of life, and anxiety of elderly patients with COVID-19. But it has little significant improvement on the depression in the elderly. Now, let us try to assimilate this entire talk with using an example of a patient. So, this is a patient A, male, 50-year-old, critically ill with COVID-19. And he has been in the ICU for 1 month, and now he has come to us for rehabilitation. This is his CT scan, and we can see that there is diffuse pulmonary lesions in both the lungs. Now, this is the assessment before the rehab. We have a breath hold test, which says that it is less than 10 seconds. Normally, it is 30 seconds. So, this implies that his lung functions are impaired. We did this 1 minute step test, which shows that the heart rate before and after the test has been 102 and 124 respectively. So there is a severely declined cardiopulmonary endurance. Again, this has been shown by the blood oxygen change that has decreased from 97% to 94% after the test, and Borg dyspnea scale, which has increased from 0 to 2. Which is quite significant. And when the patient is told to squat, he cannot complete it independently. So the lower limb muscles have atrophied and there is reduced muscle function. Now, what is the individualized rehabilitation prescription for such patients? In order to improve the dyspnea, patients are advised diaphragmatic breathing, and this doesn't need any equipment. Then airway clearance using expiratory training and sputum excretion device, and for this we need this breathing trainer, and respiratory muscle exercises, which can be using an respiratory muscle trainer, and for inspiratory muscles only, it can be sequentially increased. The load can be increased in that. Then we have thoracic expansion exercises, which includes stretching, and this doesn't need any equipment. Then activity, he can be advised for a 10 to 30 minute activity, either walking or stepping, and target heart rate should be 124. And this again needs just the oximeter and heart rate monitor, and resistance exercises using either a TheraBand or weighted cuffs can be advised. Then not to forget the nutritional support. So protein powder for muscular dystrophy, which should be 1 to 12 gram per kg. Now, so this was the pulmonary rehabilitation. Now I come to the COVID-19 rehabilitation unit. What is this? This in many of the countries like Italy, China, and many other European countries, they have come up with COVID-19 rehabilitation unit. So just after discharge from the ICU or the COVID ward, the patients are admitted into this COVID-19 rehab unit, and they undergo a rehabilitation of various aspects there. So, and it has been seen to be a very effective rehab program. Now, what are the criteria for admission here? Positive. The swab is obviously positive here. The FIM should be less than 100. No fever for at least 4 days. The saturation of oxygen should be stable, and no need for respiratory assistance or no more than 4 liter per minute of oxygen. Then, and no need to continue specialized hospitalized rehab process. Now, what are the rehabilitation interventions which have been advised? That is deconditioning, resistance training for strength deficit, balance dysfunction needing static and dynamic balance exercises, ADL training, and cognitive deficits needing neuropsychological training. Another effective ward which has been developed in many countries is a post-COVID-19 rehab ward. The patient, when has 2 consecutive negative swabs, FIM shows areas of dependence. Patient is admitted in a traditional rehab ward, and we don't need the protective equipments because it is patients are COVID-19 negative. If the patient has a negative swab, but only one area of dependence is there, and FIM score is more than 110, patient can be home discharged with outpatient rehabilitation program. Now, telemedicine and remote rehabilitation unit is a very relevant topic now, today, in these days. Why? What are the advantages? It promotes protected discharge to monitor the patients in quarantine and to ensure the continuity of care for COVID-19. And the interventions which can be undertaken in telemedicine are, we can have pulmonary rehab, cognitive training, mobility, resistance training, and gait training. How has a tele-rehab been utilized in pulmonary rehab? There has been in many countries remote monitoring of prescribed exercises, and they are being monitored. The patients are being monitored about the status of oxygen saturation and cardiovascular parameters as well. One very interesting thing which I came across was the intelligent pulmonary rehab for patients. And future work is needed as well in India regarding this. So countries have come up with this application in which the rehab content is imported into a dedicated rehab mobile application in text and video formats, including bare-handed aerobic training, resistance training with elastic band, and respiratory muscle traction exercises. Now, the app can be downloaded, and he or she can directly obtain an individualized rehab prescription through the app, followed by video training and recording of rehab exercises. Thank you so much for your kind attention.
Dr. Ritu, can you just close up, say some closing remarks?
Good afternoon, everyone, and I'd like to thank you, Dr. Geeta and Dr. Harshanand, for helping us out, though there were some technical glitches. Thanks a lot, Dr. Harshanand and Dr. Harleen, for your beautiful presentation. I'd like to thank our chairpersons, Dr. Vinod Gupta sir, as well as Dr. Sanjay Vadva sir, for chairing the sessions. And in the end, I'd like to thank all of you, and please stay safe wherever you are, at your home or at your workplace. Thanks a lot.